I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. We are coming to you not live, but fairly somewhat close to live, I guess, from New York City. Spring is here. Andrew Kuo is frolicking. What is really good, my man?
Another year goes by and another Spring Has Sprung episode is here. And I'm here for it too. It is, this weekend was crazy. And I was at Domino Park. I was gallivanting through Williamsburg. Damn, did you enjoy the weather?
I did, sort of. The phrase "spring is sprung" is one of those colloquialisms that I feel like just came into prominence over the last couple of years.
Is that right?
And then I feel that. Mm-hmm. And at least into it being said very commonly, like by brands, by Instagram captions, by you, within a minute of our spring episode, number 400 dropping.
Wait, is it because people have adopted the word sprung as in being like hyped to party and more?
Wasn't the movie Sprung from like 1997?
I consider
1995, 1996.
Maybe that's what I mean by recent, because when you said, I was thinking like the 1940s and 50s.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Zoomers have discovered Tisha Campbell.
Sprung. There's also a movie Sprung that came out in a show that came out last year.
That's a better culprit than the 1997 comedy Sprung, which did have an
Martha Plimpton. Yeah,
did have an excellent soundtrack.
Who was on?
Or
that?
At least had a soundtrack with one big hit off of it that I remember, which was Jay-Z song, like "Who You With Too" or something along those lines.
John Witherspoon was in that movie. This movie had some stars in it. Sherman Hemsley. Wow.
Legends only.
I mean,
Zoomers discovered Sprung and its original soundtrack. But yeah, that phrase, I am convinced that we will be hearing it for the rest of our lives. And there's something a little grim about that.
How come?
Okay, so we say spring is sprung now, and I will be hearing that until I am in the grave.
That's okay. I mean, do you think it's lazy because it's just like a past tense of something that shouldn't have a past tense, like winter's wintered, or like
no, because spring is sprung, like spring has arrived. It's like sprung up from the ground, from the soil.
I know the joke.
It's arrived.
But does it annoy you because of that reason?
I think it's just more. It's omnipresence. Just knowing that spring is sprung will never be vanquished from our lexicon ever again. Mm-hmm. For eternity, we'll be saying spring is sprung. Yeah, it had the song "Who You With" by Jay-Z, and also had a Group Home Family by Cannabis, Lost Boys, and Panama P.I. was on there. One in a Million remix featuring Aaliyah. Those are some of the hits off of the Sprung soundtrack.
I like it. I do like this kind of these thoughts about these words, because there's some words that I love that are gone, and there's some words I hate that are here. A word that I've been trying to say, swagless, a lot. I really enjoy that word, the word swag, as you know, as I've talked about. So I've been talking about swagless a lot, and I was thinking, and I know this kind of would surprise a few people, but I find Hoka shoes to be swagless now. So I've been trying
You've turned on Hokas.
Not the thing itself. They're very good on my back, man. They're good for my old man feet. They're great products, man. They're affordable-ish for what they give you, But like in terms of like, so I was at Domino Park. I was trying to check out what these young whippersnappers are wearing who live in.
And you were in the wrong spot, my friend.
I was in a place full of hokas, hokas as far as the eye can see, and I'm like, huh. I too am swagless. I am here among my swagless brethren.
You found no love in a hoka's place.
I did not. And it was the first kind of like, I would say it was the first balmy weekend day, maybe last week, but everyone was out. The beach or the waterfront at Domino Park was packed. And they're still doing construction on a few of those buildings, a lot of those buildings, but a few of them have been finished for a while. And it was a demographic that was very much Bill de Blasio's vision. And it just was like, I'm guilty
But
as
let's
also
be fair.
charged.
Let's be fair.
Yeah.
This is Bloomberg's vision, though, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like, you leave my man's BDD out of this.
Yeah.
This is your guy, Michael Bloomberg.
well, I only say de Blasio because his name is like stamped in metal in many places, like brought to you by William de Blasio, like whatever. But yeah, Bloomberg started all this. Hudson Yards, we don't need it, we have it. But like, just move the Knicks to Hudson Yards, please. But the waterfront at Domino Park, ironically, they branded it as like dominoes falling, which I think is kind of dark considering like how someone might frame a bunch of new buildings going up that are expensive, and not the sugar factory. I was like, oh, this is sweet. It should be playful. It should be about treats and, I don't know, childhood maybe. No, it was about dominoes falling, and the dominoes, the style dominoes did not fall. It was not impressive.
Yeah, without delving too deeply into the rough fits I've seen around the neighborhood as spring has sprung. Yeah. I think people can get a little bit of leeway. The weather got almost unbearably hot out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, it was virtually 90 degrees. So, like, I will give people a little bit of time to get their seasonally appropriate fits in order. Like, if you were just scrambling for whatever floral short sleeve shirt you had and needed to throw that on with whatever shorts were available and your flip flops and hit the streets, you get like a little window of opportunity to figure things out. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like I understand that confusion, right? It's hot, and you're like, I haven't even thought about wearing something short sleeved in years. Well, a year. Where are they? Are they in bags? Are they clean? Are they ironed? Are they wrinkled? Like, what am I doing? I understand the seasonal confusion. But yeah, man, on the other night, we were going through Williamsburg, which I do not hang out in often at all.
Oh, really?
I'm never over there.
Cool.
And I was by there on it. No, I mean, I literally am never over there, and I have not been in years.
Hey,
are you trying to doubt me?
Is the lot considered more Greenpoint than Williamsburg? For
Yes.
sure, right? Okay.
I feel like that's right on the border. I'm really thinking the area where it's like Manhattan, Grand. I mean, whatever. It all blends in. But that area you're talking about, Domino Park, like Williamsburg proper, I'm just never over there other than taking the train. And yeah, walking around there on Saturday was kind of crazy. I had really forgotten the like density of people just on the streets when the temperature is nice out. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to my friend, she's a woman. She was like, you know what? I don't think it's safe. I'm like, I think it's probably safe, but it gives off an unsafe energy.
And you were there at night, right?
I was there at night. It's just so packed and so drunk that if you aren't ready for like Murray Hill meets Bourbon Street, then you're going to be freaked out.
Dude, yeah, I was thinking the other day, in an end to fun neighborhoods sometimes is Hell Square. remember when Hell Square was at its like fever Epstein's pitch, where it was just like dark, aggressive power drinking and a lot of cops and people spilling out into the streets. And it was just like a really unsafe vibe starting on the weekends at like 1 p.m. And it would go on all the way till 4 a.m. closing time. And the cops would have the spotlights up, and it just felt like lit is hell, right? No pun intended. And that is what, like, I don't think anybody really wants. Who, I mean, nightlife people want action, but not that kind of like put your hands up and fight action, or dudes just kind of peacocking, like that is not fun. Dudes like, you want to fight, that kind of thing. And
so you want the action, but you don't want to get active.
I want like music. I want action on the dance floor, man. That's what I want. Like I want people smoking outside, being hilarious, not ripped dudes looking to start trouble. But and it's annoying, right?
I hear you. I'm just going to push back. I'm trying to find ripped dudes who want to kick my ass. Like, where are you guys? I'd like to be around you and just let's see how this plays out. You guys aren't beefy enough. There's some guys who might get into a roid rage at my expense? I don't know. Just hit me at like 3:30. I'll be there.
And they cut off traffic. No cars could go through. And this was in the proximity of the Ludlow Orchard years, right? It was like right after Max Fish was still there. And it had turned from like kind of a skate red stripe sponsored like t-shirt streetwear kind of hang into like a full-blown bridge and tunnel beer-a-thon. And I think that is the possibility of an outcome of Dime Square, and also Williamsburg for sure.
Well, we have I don't know that will happen to Dime Square, although it may, only because they have so many other areas to do this, but that does not preclude that from occurring. But I actually think from a historical standpoint, you've really nailed it, because you could probably say that maybe this started, let's say, West Village, like long time ago, right? And then you ended up with like Sushi Samba and that segment that people hung out at. And then that part's a little hazy. But if we look at the other places in New York where you've created these hell squares, meatpacking, for sure.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That was a place where there were some cool clubs, APT, Lotus, whatever, and it just became exactly that.
Yeah.
Police horses, mega clubs, people everywhere, hotels, restaurants. We saw it there. We saw it happen in the East Village for sure. We saw it happen in the Lower East Side. We've seen it happen in Williamsburg, both right around where the train is, but also over near where like the Wyeth Hotel is, and when they opened the hotels around there and the nightclubs around there. So we've actually seen this happen over and over and over. Yeah, from places that were sparsely populated, that were cool hangout spots, and they just exploded into nightlife destinations. And New York, because it's a huge city, has a whole bunch of these spots. And I don't know if they ever go back the other direction. Like, certainly it's possible over like the long curve of time, the arc of humanity. But I can't say a neighborhood went from being cool to uncool to then coming back 15 years later and suddenly being chill again. Maybe it's possible, but I can't think of a great example.
I know. Like, not in a nightlife way. I think about that boomerang for a place like Tribeca, which was like awesome, and then like not awesome, and now it's cool again, but it's not nightlife. And when Epstein's got booted unfairly, I thought like the cops just kind of put the clamps on them and ushered them out like they do a lot of other places with like fines and visits and vibe checks for months, even years. I thought it was going to mellow out, and I was waiting for like even richer people to populate like the Hell Square area. But then I walked by the other night and like, no, it's still like Pianos is still going as it was when you remembered it. And remember, Piano started as like our friend Humi started that, who used to work at Swim. And it used to be like a bar where you can get a burger, where weirdos would DJ, and then it just got blown out because it was kind of cool. And it used to be it still is a music venue that CMJ like used as one of their locations.
The Wednesday party, as we mentioned a while back, is like cool people again, but that's like the total anomaly over there. At that venue. They still have people who, or at least they have someone who's doing like smart bookings for young people that would typically be only playing in Bushwick. They're getting the right people at those parties on a Wednesday. But absolutely, the trajectory of that area that is, as you mentioned, maybe people aren't aware, called Hell Square, really did travel kind of with pianos in many ways. Like that, I remember hanging out at pianos with like the guys from Ninja Sonic, as you said, having a burger with like, you know, Telly and Jaja, and then suddenly being like, oh, I would never go there. That would be insane to be at pianos.
I mean, our friends still work there. You know, they still manage the place. My band played there a bunch. We used to DJ quite a bit in upstairs and in the venue room. But like, it's all good, you know. But the thing that's interesting about Hell Square is it's like resilience, because it didn't flip over to a place like Domino Park. There wasn't like an influx of real estate investment, even though Essex Crossing gave them an opportunity to do so. It's still just like 20-something dudes looking to fight. It's been many decades, man. 2.
Yeah, I think when I think of, it's been a long time, but if you go down Orchard now on a weekend, it has the same chaotic energy that it's had for like 15 years.
Yeah.
I wonder, and maybe this is just because it sort of is even before our time, is that like maybe there was a time when like McDougal Street was like cool as shit. And that was why it still has all those like head shops, and it still has, you know, Mamoons and things like that, that it was a bohemian little epicenter. And then now we're on what?
You like comedy?
Two and a half decades, 3 decades of it being like this like weird touristy, studenty, just like entertainment district that like no one we know has gone to in years. When I walk down there, I kind of like it.
Well, I was going to say, like, is this a good thing for a city? Like, for a place to maintain its character for that long, whether it's my taste or someone else's taste, because I think a lot of people would look at quote-unquote Hell Square and be like, that's a really fun place to go. We should go. We should round up, you know, the 5
Clearly they do, right? They're going.
Yeah.
They're there.
Yeah.
All the people who are populating that place definitely have that idea.
And it's small, so it doesn't take many to cause a ruckus. But like after you're done doing your reps at, you know, the bench press, like let's go to Hell Square and like have 15 beers, you know. But it might be a good thing for the city, because I think sometimes a part of me thinks the change is the unnerving part. The change in any direction, whether that becomes an influx of money or the removal of resources. The change is kind of jarring, like putting a prison in Chinatown on Baxter. But when things remain consistent, even though they're not things I enjoy, like that's kind of what makes a city like usable and approachable and predictable and good, right? That's just a passing thought.
Yeah, I think it could probably go both ways. Mm-hmm. Where if you look at a city and say, nothing ever changes here. This is the bohemian quarter. This is the nightlife quarter. This is the posh quarter. This is that. And it may be a totally reasonable dynamic. People get in where they fit in. It's very comfortable. But it's hard to say if that can last as static forever, right? In a city that's growing or thriving. That feels very European in some ways.
Right.
Where it's like, yeah, this is always going to be like the bohemian neighborhood. This is always going to be the place where you go at night because there's going to be big dance clubs. But New York has never been that kind of city. I think the objection that we have is that it feels, at least Manhattan-centrically, of course, that's not the case, that it feels very one-sided in Manhattan, where it doesn't feel like it's an equal balance where, okay, this place is becoming annoying, so this place is becoming cool. It's more like getting painted into a corner.
Yeah.
Not 100% though, because we've talked about this. There's more stuff interesting that's happening in, let's say, Tribeca, in the financial district. Like there are pockets where it's happening, but it is definitely like this wave that has moved downward from 14th Street from the 20s over like the last couple decades, just like eroding away at the shoreline of places that were habitable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, you know, how I annoyingly say, like, in theory, art doesn't get worse. It just gets better, right? Like, it may not be things that you enjoy as much year to year, but knowing things and understanding things that happen in real time just make for a better thing in theory. But nightlife in New York doesn't really operate like that because you need a certain set of things to all happen at once, sort of like a basketball team. You need someone with a cool vision, you need an audience, and you need like the cooperation of like real estate and law, right? And in order to operate your business. And I think the most important thing is someone with a vision, like someone who wants to do something and recognizes what people want in that moment, whether that be a dive bar, a dance club, a Guido bar, you know, I don't know. I can't say Guido anymore. Bridge and Tunnel bar. I don't.
Quo has been canceled.
Can you say?
You
cannot say that. You cannot say that.
I don't.
Super Mario Brothers is about 2 plumbers. That's it.
I think Guido is a slur. It is for sure, right?
It doesn't feel good. I take it back. That's not nice.
All right, in 2010, that was a long time ago. Jersey Shore was in its heyday. The New York Times, paper of record, wrote a story discussing that word that prompts either a fist pump or a scowl. I really would have said like a fist pump or a fist punch.
Yeah. I don't know. Some
Paulie D says, I was born and raised a Guido. It's just a lifestyle. It's being Italian. It's representing family, friends, tanning, gel, everything. I'm going to say that you're not allowed to use it.
Oh, definitely not. No, I apologize. No, even though he is comfortable with it, I cannot say that.
You know what, Andrew? Honestly, not good enough. I'm going to need you to meet with guys from, I don't know, Boar's Head.
Boar's Head?
I don't know.
Okay,
they might be Italian. They're selling salamis. You're going to have to meet with them, though, before you get back on the pod.
I have to sit down with famous Ray? That's going to be a problem. Oh, here's Mario and Luigi. Man.
Andrew, you're going to have to go watch the Mario Brothers movie a couple times. Then you're going to meet with Joe Torre.
And I'm going to have to donate like all my earnings to supporting Mario 2, more Mario Brothers.
You're going to have to donate all of your earnings to like an Italian hero spot on Graham Avenue.
Ooh, only if they have the 7-footers.
One Godfather's up. That's a slur, Andrew.
Can I donate money so we can add 3 feet to the party sub? How dare you?
Wow. I never thought your rivalry, that goes back decades with the Italians, would be your undoing, but here we are.
Undoing. I mean, me and Danilo Gallinari I thought had a great relationship. I think he's one of the best Knicks draft picks ever. His jersey still hangs in Little Italy in New York next to an Italian flag. I thought we were good, but
some of my best friends are Italian. Andrew Quo.
Yeah. I mean, I don't say the last consonant when I say I mean, the last vowel when I
You
describe
don't do
pastas.
you don't do mortadella with a soft A at the end.
No. There's no hard IE at the end of fettuccine or E at the end of fettuccine. It's two completely different things.
Speaking of which, I bought some plastic containers to put things in to keep them so they're just not in boxes. And I thought it was pretty shrewd and it looked kind of nice. And then I realized that I've been very reliant on, when I'm cooking pasta, on the box telling me like the range for al dente.
Oh.
And now when they're in these plastic containers, I don't have that. It's been a little bit jarring. I'm like, wait, is this 9 minutes, 11 minutes,
Yeah.
13 minutes? Who can remember? And then you just end up kind of wasting time testing it. I don't know. I kind of miss my cardboard boxes, I gotta say.
I do kind of a similar thing when I buy like Stouffer's French bread pizza, because the box is kind of too big for my freezer. So I take them out of the container and I can like hide the French bread in different pockets of my freezer. And I forget how long I'm supposed to cook them for. But then I just look online. It's all online. You could just Google like the brand and the cooking time.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what I did. I had to get to that point.
That was an annoying 15 seconds, I'm sure. That goes from al dente to
Dude.
mushy.
Like that 15 seconds.
That's the window.
I mean, look, eating the pasta cost me 4 minutes of my life. So now it's
4
4
minutes?
and 15 seconds.
That's long. How much pasta did you eat? Like 4 boxes? A box a minute? All right, what's going up with your case of bucatine? Have you put a dent into it?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember if it came with 20 or 24 boxes, and I got it during the pandemic. So now it's old pasta at this point, but whatever, it's fine.
Wait,
I feel like that
does
lasts
pasta
forever.
age poorly? I thought it
don't
was
think so.
shelf-stable.
I think it is too, or at least that's how I'm operating, and have not been.
According to the Kardashians, those labels, I mean, those are probably as old as times, as old as Hell Square, right?
I think it's about halfway done. Which is a dent. That's like it qualifies.
Al dente.
Mr.
Yeah.
Dente is my father's name. Call me Al.
Yeah, I always thought there should be an Italian restaurant called Al Dente's and a strip club called Sirloin. Strip club steakhouse. I'm sorry. I forgot that part. Sirloin.
I mean, as we're talking about the Greenpoint Williamsburg corridor, there's a spot on Nassau that's called Maison Jar. And I feel like someone just came up with that name and then was obligated to open the business. I think it's it's kind of a sustainability model where it's like, yeah, you take the jar home and then you come back and refill it, so we're not doing plastic containers. Like, oh, that's virtuous and all, sure, whatever. But it did feel like the place existing was an imperative solely because someone was like, I just have this name. It's Maison Jar. It's like the House of Jars. You get it? But it's like Mason Jar. So we have to open it. My hands are tied.
That was like the whole internet era. You come up with a cool .com name and then someone gives you money and then you think of the business afterwards. Yeah, I don't know if I would eat at a place called Maison Jar, but I saw online that there was a Thai restaurant called Thai Food Near Me, which I at first thought was funny, but then I was annoyed in the way that mic drop insults on Succession annoy me. I was like, that's funny. I'm like, ooh, no, that's kind of annoying. It's like, mic drop.
Oh, it's super annoying.
It's clever in that like they went through with it and put up the sign that said Thai food near me, which was kind of funny. But yeah, super annoying, right?
It's like, well, our entire identity is just going to be gaming SEO and passing it off as being clever.
I hate
also,
Meta,
same-
man. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's annoying. Brooklinen is another company. I felt like someone came
God,
up with a name
Jesus.
and just decided we've got to come up with a brand now. We have to do it. Brooklinen. It's like Sheets, but Brooklyn. But,
Yeah.
All right, let's get some VC funding in here and roll out the queen size and the California Kings.
Well, it's funny how like it should be bedding.com or sheets.com. But like the way we own these URLs and words, I always think of pets.com failing, one of the most infamous failures in the original .com bubble. And now they figured it out and everyone uses chewy.com. And I'm like, so what happened to pets.com? That should just be it. Like, Chewy is not clever, but memorable. It's good enough. But like, are we just gonna let pets.com like float away into the ether? The hell, man. You know what I'm saying? It really gets under my skin, man. The GovWorks, another example. That's just disappeared.
Light a candle for pets.com. Pour out a little Alpo.
But then you get like
URLs that are no longer
alpro.com.
here.
Yeah. You get a playful pun.
Speaking of dearly departed, shout out to Ahmad Jamal, the jazz legend who I believe passed away yesterday, or at least it became known yesterday. Mm-hmm. And he's not famous in the way that a lot of jazz titans are. He's sort of a niche guy, and I think that people should know about him that he really dictated the sound of a lot of golden age rap music to an extent that is far more profound than is commonly held.
Can you give some examples?
Well, so he's a piano player, and a lot of his stuff was at tempos that make sense for hip hop, but also with like little riffs within songs. So some of his jazz tracks have been sampled many, many times, and you wouldn't even know it was the same song. It's just maybe piano sounds similar, but the riffs are different. So when they're sped up or slowed down or chopped up, they don't really sound the same. So Premier leaned on him heavily. Pete Rock leaned on him a lot. I'm trying to think. Stakes is High is an Ahmad Jamal sample. Nas, I Gave You Power.
Stakes
MOP.
is High. Is that the dispensary / steakhouse?
That's the one.
Oh, okay, I thought so. Cool. In Hell Square.
Well, there's 7 of it in Hell Square. So that's right. Block.
That's right.
But yeah, the list is really long. It's like there's like Fat Joe, Shit Is Real. I can't even do it justice. If you went on like who sampled whatever, you'll see it. It's just an
MOP,
outrageous
Jay-Z.
list,
yeah.
Oh yeah, Jay-Z, Feeling It is him.
Illest Brother, Gangstar. They Say by Common, Kanye West, John Legend. Yeah, he's a big deal. My Ahmad Jamal game is not as tight as yours, but this is impressive. A lot of Gangstar.
Tons and tons of Gangstar. Tons of DJ Premier.
Yeah, Pete Rock. Black Smith and Wesson by Black Moon. That was his sample, huh?
Yeah, I mean it's just tons and tons and tons, and
very cool.
A lot of it really was that specific era we're talking about, which was like late 90s to early 2000s, but especially late 90s. That sound of Pete Rock, of actually not even Pete Rock, like later Pete Rock. The sound of DJ Premier in many ways was kind of Ahmad Jamal. So anyway, I think what's interesting about him, not only that he's got some really like cool stuff, some of his live albums are really good, whether you're a jazz buff or not, and whether that's him as a solo artist or him as part of the Ahmad Jamal trio, there's a lot of good stuff to check out if you just want something to spin in your apartment while you're scrolling Twitter, like during the moments when you can't listen to the world's most influential basketball podcast. Like, here's something else you can check out.
Two Mac Hami songs.
but it made me, which is a new artist too, which
Yeah,
also made me
totally.
think a little bit about, like, I know of him because I was interested in finding out like where samples came from. I have Ahmad Jamal stuff on vinyl because no, this is from that time period when
Yeah.
you would look at the back of a record and it would say like this is Ahmad Jamal, and then you'd go to the record store and you'd find Ahmad Jamal records and you'd listen to them and stuff like that. And it's weird though at this point going to certain restaurants and they're playing the original songs that have been used by like Dipset or RZA or whatever. And I'm like, I kind of don't like it though.
I mean, the Wu-Tang ones are famous, right? You can go get some Asian delicacies, talk some basketball for hours with the soundtrack of original Wu-Tang samples.
I just feel like when I was going to try to find these things and discovering artists like Ahmad Jamal, that was kind of a cool experience. But now, maybe just that I'm older, when I hear a playlist of like Stax records or classic 60s stuff, and it's clear they're just put together because they have a known rap sample within them, it gets real like Carmelini restaurant vibes. Like, this playlist isn't actually about these records that you're playing. It's that someone sampled them, and now I'm annoyed.
Yeah. That brand of clever is kind of frustrating. Not too dissimilar from like Succession, but it's just like oh, you may know what it is. This is some connoisseurship stuff, but it's also classic, and it's also like the source, and it is a kind of discussion that like I don't have much interest in, for sure.
Like, I think it's cool if like the riff is in there a little bit, but when it's obvious that the only interest in the song is that someone else turned it into a bigger hit, it's like a weird adult contemporary version of crate digging. Like, two things that I find
For sure.
annoying coalescing into one.
Yeah, and there is also what are the fields that are most obsessed with authenticity? It would be like food, music, politics. And I think of those first. So food and music, like if you walk into Carmelini's, they want you to know they're authentic, right? So it would probably be like jazz music that wasn't sampled by rap music, classical music, I don't know, like the original Rat Pack, I guess. But to have it cross over into like, well, if you guys like Wu-Tang, you should hear Ahmad Jamal. Like, that kind of authenticity to me is preventative from like from us finding out new things.
It kind of falls into the category of DJs who are trying to educate their audience,
For sure.
which is
There's many of them.
not my favorite vibe.
No.
You know what was funny, because I meant to bring this up a second ago. When we know your take, which I love, and that music is always getting better, culture is always getting better, etc.
Sure.
And you were bringing up nightlife as kind of an exception to that. That these aren't the same. That we can say, look, music keeps adapting and building on itself in a way that perhaps nightlife and neighborhoods in New York City don't. They're building upon themselves, but maybe not in ways that we should even appreciate.
More educated, more thoughtful. Like, right. It is not a straight line of knowledge. It's kind of like bobbing and weaving within problem solving.
So where do you fall on those like Twitter accounts that romanticize
Oh my God.
like Deco architecture or Gaudi stuff in Barcelona? I'd be like, why don't we make buildings like this anymore?
I love them. There needs to be that. And I don't want to talk about basketball yet, but this runs parallel to a movement that doesn't want people to think about advanced statistics anymore. Like, it is about the beauty of the game in your eyes and beholding the skills that these players have, not these numbers that kind of like demystify, de-romanticize the beautiful thing that we're watching. And these accounts, like these culture critic accounts, like will show. I mean, we touched on this a few episodes ago, like Notre Dame versus MSG. It's like, oh,
Totally.
And the targets are always modernist and brutalist architecture, you know. And I I joke that sometimes I expect to see like a unkept wall that's yellowing with paint peeling against a newly painted wall. It's just like some people are just built different, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about anymore, you know. But like it would make sense to echo our conversation about Notre Dame and that kind of thing, and churches and cathedrals that were built out of the fear of God and religion, and sort of made an homage to these ideas that delighted and terrified us. And then you had all these horrible, horrible wars in the world, and then like the kind of idea of modernism kind of springs up, and you know, every generation is like looks at the previous generation. It's like, yo, fuck you for making my life so difficult. Like I don't want to live your life, you know, like this Varsity Blues, or is it? Yeah, it's a Varsity Blues, right? And modernism pops up because of that, because they wanted a break from religion. They wanted to start over after all the wars. They wanted this purity, and a lot of it is very hard to talk about because it had roots in ideas that I fucking hate, right? Like a lot of the stuff that comes out of those wars and is a cause of those wars, like racism and purity, discussing stuff. But the art that comes out of it is notable because then you get like Le Corbusier and Malevich and all these awesome thinkers and as idea makers. And these websites kind of start all the way back at the beginning of this conversation to maybe people who don't really care about it. And it's kind of a gotcha that I very much enjoy because it's kind of rebooting this conversation that has been kind of sussed out for generations. Like modernism didn't work. That's why we had postmodernism. Postmodernism kind of didn't work. That's why we had postmodernism. Now we're just in an era of like the multiverse and like 50 Avengers movies.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about some of these same concepts, you know, where, and again, in nightlife, right? Or just in the way that, let's say we carry ourselves. You know, you look at old photos and, oh, here it is. It's Rochester, New York in 1930. And everyone's wearing a hat and a jacket. And there's a city with, you know, where people can be ambulatory. And they're all downtown. They're walking around. They're going to the Rialto. They're going to the cinema. They're watching plays. And like, I get that there's an appeal that you can look at this and say, you know, setting aside the like literal like Jim Crow of the time. I'm saying this solely from this like theoretical decorum that did not really exist for people who were not white in America and white men in America. Mm-hmm. Setting that aside, we're just talking about just aesthetics, right? You look downtown, you're like, look at this, it's glorious. They're building these movie theaters, they're building these institutions, this architecture, and then you look at now, and then you look in like an airport, like look at everyone just dressed like slobs, like oh, everyone's just like looks gross. People are taking off their feet off, people are taking their shoes off and their socks off and putting their bare feet up on the person in front of them's headrest. When we used to be there, like, you know, smoking cigars on planes, like kings. This general coarsening of society. So I understand why these people do have, like, this idea that humanity has cheapened itself, and that we are like aesthetically adrift. I think there is an enticing, seductive idea there. But I would also say that, like, it looks hot. Like, they're wearing, like...
What do you mean? Like, the hot boys or just, like, temperature hot?
Yeah, like, they're walking around, they're wearing, like, wool hats and dress jackets.
Yeah.
Like, I look at them like, that looks so sweaty.
Yeah. I mean, it is, yeah, to your point, suffering, right? Like, if all of New York City or your city of choice look like the Cathedral of Notre Dame, I think that's a really oppressive way to live because it is hot. The eyes above you are on you, right? Like, and I love modernism because it is an aspirational, in a good way, an aspirational thing, which says, in my opinion, that we are capable of creating something new at any point. And we, a lot of these sites have like a beautiful Renaissance painting and like a Cubist painting and be like, what the hell happened to us? And I'm like, we evolved and we started devaluing the idea of craft in the way other people saw it and turned it into a conceptual conversation where maybe the tools are the same but the objects look different. And I think it's aspirational on a micro level too, to think that like you can improve on something not by adding something to it but by reducing it. And this is like good Italian cooking, good Chinese cooking. Some of it is complex as hell, and me and you love that stuff. Some of it is really simple, and that's why I think we're living in the best time ever, because we have those both, the conflicting ideas running simultaneously together.
Well, right. It's like, if you think it's really cool if everyone wears jackets and hats, and you think that that's like a better alternative, you can join the Hasidim. That's how they're dressing. That's what they're doing. Like, you can go over to South Side and be around that and embrace that and live like that. Like, well, actually, it seems annoying though. If I have to always dress like that, that's just how society like demands, requires that I look on a daily basis. Like, well, okay, so you don't actually want to live like that then. Fair enough. Mm-hmm. You don't want to ever, you look at place in China, North Korea, where there is like more or less dress codes. Like, would you like to live like that? At the same time, I'm walking around the neighborhood, my local health square, and you see someone in like a shitty V-neck tee, basketball shorts, and flip-flops. And you're like, okay, this is uncouth. Go back home.
Easy,
come on. You
Easy.
can do a
Just
little
trying to
better.
Be comfortable. Yeah.
You can do better. This is.
I
this
love
is
that.
Impolite,
We
sir.
could all do better. Yes. Well, I love these sites or these accounts because I always take away like modernism was cool because, and they're just talking about math and modernism. It's basically what they mean. They don't like geometry or everything is geometric. They don't like the kind of the bearing of a certain idea or soul, whatever. It doesn't appeal to them. Fair enough. That's cool. But I love modernism because instead, before, like the Dark Ages and Renaissance, like there was the fear of judgment from like something we didn't understand. So we had to like pay it homage. But modernism kind of states like, we're good. Like we're pure. We are okay. We don't have to fear anything. We can create a life from a blank slate that we create. I think that's very cool. That's all.
I kind of agree with that. That's fair enough. But yeah, like there are parts of like society from those eras that are also horrific. That or when I say we, I mean all these neoclassicist accounts. We are not one of them. I'm saying what those guys are ignoring, which is, of course, as we said, stuff about race and gender and sexuality that are extremely primitive to today. And then you see them rearing up again. And, in the last couple of days, we've seen some really outrageous stuff there. Like
Kid Rock.
Just really insane things. And you see Bud Light goes out and I think they give a trans influencer like a sponsored post.
Yeah, they're just like, salute to you, oh, wonderful human being. Yeah.
Like they didn't even really do anything other than like, hey, what's up? Here you go. You like Bud Light? Shout out to you. Yeah. They did the least. Like they did nothing, and that just sent right wingers into a frenzy of driving over cans of Bud Light, shooting their guns off at it.
Second shooter.
At cans.
Well, they unearthed hateful people in my opinion, unearthed a can, like a collector's can that was like, love your neighbor, pride, everyone should live together happily. And it was an old can, I believe, not even American. I think it was like distributed in low runs somewhere else for like some event. And that image got unearthed and started a whole firestorm of just being like, Bud Light doesn't stand for America. Bud Light's a Belgian company that was formerly like, I don't know, owned by another country. Like Stella Artois owns Anheuser-Busch, but like the idea that you're making a political statement with the beer you drink is
King Leopold ever do to hurt anybody?
Right.
Leopold, an innocent man.
At every turn, this is a funny story because people are just morons. But I think it's interesting, especially when Dana White from UFC is like, I don't know if this was even a real quote, but he's like, we don't do anything woke. Like, we are not a woke company at all. Do not come at us with that. I'm like, wait a second. Because the gender identification of a lot of your athletes is like on a wonderful spectrum, man. Like, it is very clear to see when you watch a UFC card that these people are fighters on one hand, but like kind of righteous on another hand, like, I don't know. It is there as clear as an eye test can be. So I don't know even, and of course the talk back is like, what does woke even mean? It seems like woke is just people who are scared of the LGBTQI conversation. That's kind of what I read from it, right?
Well, also, it's definitely anti-black too. It just is sort of a catch-all.
Right. Throw that in there, Jesus Christ.
I think, if they really struggle to define woke. If I was someone who was bothered by it, I would define it as like an overcorrection to like our historic like problems or something. But they can't even acknowledge that there was a historic problem to begin with, or whatever. Oh, they're not interested in that definition. To me, I'm like, if you wanted to really pin it down, it'd be like people who are annoyingly like progressive, except that they don't like anything progressive, whether it's even annoying or not. And there are a lot of like funny elements of, this thing with Budweiser and Bud Light and like the trans influencer. But what's not funny at all is this like, I'm trying to think of the best way of describing it. Just this sort of sneering hatred and like gleeful sneering hatred for like trans people that is and for gay people that is like really swelled up from the right wing over the last few years. And I'm not saying they were ever friendly to those communities. They weren't, but it has really taken hold, and it now is sort of all encompassing, where it's bringing in Pizzagate and it's bringing in conspiracy theories and QAnon, and then it's
grooming,
also bringing in it's all this stuff. It's like just they are absolutely obsessed with trans people, like existing in public with drag queens and events that feature drag queens. It's completely insane to me. Like it is so fucking crazy, the obsession. I don't get why people care until I realize this is just the culture war that they have decided to fight. Yeah. And the horrible part is like that it's just towards people who are just trying to live their lives. Yeah, man. I have a lot of hatred towards like my friends who are flaky,
or like restaurants who don't serve me what I want, or like people who I know who don't work hard. And it's because I'm flaky. I don't work hard as I want to, and I sometimes overcook some pasta like some other people here. And like it infuriates me, and I always have to be like, because I feel this every day where I'm just like, I didn't get enough done today. I should have seen my friend. I should have been more al dente about that bucatini, you know? And there's a certain, I think that's not a catch-all, but there's certain truth to that. And this Bud Light story, I find myself in winning in indifference, because I have no sympathy towards big beer companies at all. I also don't care about morons, like people who are mad at people just trying to be happy. So I'm like, oh, I just don't care about any of this. You guys can argue all you want and shoot up a bunch of cans, but like, I don't think about either of you guys that much.
Oh,
you know?
I agree with that. Like, I don't care about Budweiser's role in this whatsoever. You know, they're...
Yeah, I'm not buying a case of Bud Light. I mean, who cares about Anheuser-Busch?
But I just mean they are neither heroic nor non-heroic in any or evil. They're just a corporation. When they are reaching out to a trans influencer, they are trying to get people who are trans to buy their beer. When they do this sort of weird statement that doesn't make anything clear, they are trying to assuage the people who are shooting guns at their beer to go back to purchasing it. Like they are just a beer company in this thing. They and like, oh, we've always supported first responders. I'm like, shut up, you're a beer company, man.
I know, seriously. And like, I do find the reluctance to embrace and adapt to evolution as a theme, especially with basketball happening now. But like, I think we're socially, and this is not going to sound correct, but I think socially we're in a pretty good place, because like, even opposed to 25 years ago, like Reagan era stuff, like I think people are living like the way they want to more. Not as much as it should, but like I think there's more of a space for people to like talk about who they are and how they feel about things. And this is all great stuff, in my opinion. It could obviously be better. I'm looking forward to the next step. But like, there will always be the crab that wants to hold on to the other crab and bring it back into the basket, right? So it makes sense.
Yes.
What, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying you're making a great point that I think is somewhat forgotten. And it can feel justifiably so, and realistically so, that we are being dragged backwards at times, because this isn't linear. That when we say, you know what, we're going to have, you know, thousands of people rallying for Black Lives Matter around Brooklyn Museum. We're going to have the largest, you know, protests around the United States in history about Black Lives Matter. To expect that there won't be pushback from the people who are on the other side of that issue is naive. So I think what you're saying is true. There is certainly more space right now for a trans person to live their life in America than there was in the past, at least within our lifespans. Because the irony of this being part of like woke culture is that there have literally always been people who've done this in like every society.
Right.
There have always been people who were gender fluid forever in every kind of human setting that didn't basically make it like punishable by like ostracization.
Yeah. Don't do too much research on those Renaissance paintings, because like a lot of this stuff has been happening for a long time. You know.
That's what I'm saying, right? Via like religion and death and et cetera.
Right. Yeah, and right to your point, I think we had one of the most, I believe in protests. I think it's a great thing. I think America went through a huge, New York went through a huge turning point with the BLM stuff. But then we get your boy Eric Adams as our mayor. So there is always like a counter, or a kind of I call it like elasticity towards something else. And we may not be able to see like a graph curve going up when we're just looking at a small sample size. But overall, I think we are making progress. And of course, people like Kid Rock or whoever has that steamroller running over cans of beer, which they should have spread out more. If they wanted more of an effect, they should have not bunched up all those cases of Bud Light, because it's like a pincushion. It doesn't look good when you smash it, because together they are stronger. They should have spread them out and had the cans explode more performatively. These guys, man,
Could have
not
done
my
better.
favorite. Not my favorite.
But you've alluded to it a couple times, so let's just do it. You were talking about sort of this idea
Bucatini.
of, dude, you've already apologized.
I'm sorry. I'm
keep
sorry.
Keep your head low, or you're gonna have to meet with Joe Pesci or something. But you were trying to get into this idea of like the sort of the primitivism that is rearing back, and whether it's neoclassicism or it is just regressivism or it is just hostility towards modernism and progressive ideas. We've seen some of that in discussion of stats lately in the NBA, where this would apply to saying, hey, you know what's too complicated? Points per game. That's hard for me to grasp. What about total points? That I can get.
Wait, are you saying we divide them by the number of games they played? That's a little too much.
All right, nerd.
Yeah.
But this idea, and JJ Redick was saying, well, wasn't JJ Redick saying that he wanted more stats though, right? Wasn't that what he said? He wants that, and I think that's kind of things that we have discussed, that maybe there's a place for
He's
NFL
all over the
style
place.
explanation of
Right.
of plays and breakdowns in a way that the NBA doesn't currently do with its current talking heads.
Reddick is trying to find his sea legs. I think he's obviously a smart guy, obviously good at this analyst thing, but he's trying to find his voice a little bit. Voting for Giannis kind of puzzled some people, and while he's we need the NFL analysts on ESPN to kind of their cultural influence has to seep into the NBA because they're smart, they're funny, they know their stuff. And he was kind of referring to himself, I think, because he's smart and funny and knows his stuff. But he also was saying there's a problem with advanced metrics, and I think this was in defense to his Giannis vote. But he was saying that certain metrics don't make a whole lot of sense, and a player like him understands the way the value kind of activates in a game, and you kind of had to be there, and your eyes tell you a lot more than these stats can. But Jalen Rose is on this thing. Somehow NFL, Merrill Hodge his clip came up about evaluating Johnny Manziel versus Skip Bayless, and somehow Skip Bayless is the stat guy here, and he got something wrong. It all just doesn't make sense, and I am sure the people, us included, who think that this MVP race has kind of revealed a flaw in stats, we're correct in saying that, everybody, but I think the correct response is adjust those stats, and we need more stats to tell a bigger story. We shouldn't reduce it, because total points doesn't tell us much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think the stat versus eye test debate has been going on in basketball now for a decade. It's been going on in baseball maybe for 20 years. This straw man figure
Right.
of exactly. This is literally Moneyball, and we're still arguing about who's right in this. I don't see that in basketball even being a thing anymore, other than it being a talking point. To me, these compound stats, Raptor, per BPM, I think generally speaking, most people use them as little thumbnails or to support their own agenda. Sure. Like if you're like, look, I think Jokic is MVP. Here's why. Look at how he's kicking ass in these stats. Sure, like they work in that same regard as someone saying points per game. Someone saying, yeah, but look at Tatum. He's getting 8 rebounds. He's a great rebounder. They're components to an argument. Sure.
Westbrook's MVP season rebounding was noisy as hell.
But that one was triple doubles, right? That was.
Yep.
It's not that different. It's taking a set of numbers or a few numbers or a specific number and saying, well, I think that's compelling. That's convincing to me. When I talk with people about basketball, I don't hear people saying, yeah, but his Raptor is crazy. Like those are almost like laughing stock things. They're used on occasion and people use like as a little thumbnail, but no one, not on ESPN, not on Twitter, no one is there like, yes, but Raptor. No one, except for maybe the person who designed that stat, or Carmelo or LeBron. No one is using these things. No one is using them. They are not a large or significant or important part of any basketball debate. So my thing is, what are we talking about? Just explain which analytics.
Efficiency. It's all efficiency.
And
people don't. That flies in the face of Kobe Mamba mentality.
And I think that is fine, and efficiency is a good conversation. We talked about this on Twitter a little bit. The NBA's biggest problem was that, unlike baseball, which got on base percentage and slugging into the lexicon of their fan base, the NBA has just never been able or ever seemed compelled to introduce effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage as things that were valuable to its fans. And they still don't. When you look up, when you're watching on TV, it doesn't say so-and-so's true shooting percentage in a way that most fans think it's anything other than dorky. And even when we say it or someone else says it, it sounds nerdy to me. And I'm like, of course I value it. It's someone's overall contributions offensively in terms of scoring. It is the single biggest, most important number that you can look at, along with usage, to understand how good someone is putting points on the board. And yet it just is not part of the discussion of like regular fans. Like that is a failure of the NBA, I think.
Well, it is a trick, and this happens in politics a lot. I think stats in the internet were a democratization of information of the NBA. You had front office. Now everyone's a capologist, for example, right? We all understand salary cap implications in ways that we didn't 20 years ago. And I think it is a trick in that it's within the interest of some people to have information that we don't have. And, in politics, we should be talking about the environment. We should be talking about things that will affect the next generation. This is what politics is for. Health insurance, health care, quality of life. These are important. But instead, the trick is we're debating children's books. Like, there's nothing wrong with most children's books, but somehow we're debating that, and it is a performative outrage that I think comes from, in the NBA's case, a way to sell ads for games. Like, remember that ESPN's power comes from having broadcast games. They want to drive eyes to the games that they paid quite a bit of money to get. ABC, Disney. They want to drive viewership, as they should. And that's why teams like the Cavaliers weren't talked about that much this year. They were awesome. And that's a new, exciting team. And they're on the come up. But you don't really hear much about Mobley or even Donovan Mitchell because they didn't have those games scheduled. And we know that the teams that they talk about, there was too much Dame Lillard, to be honest. There should have been more Mobley. There should have been more Darius Garland. So the trick in the NBA is the people telling us to just don't be bothered by the details are the people who make a living off of telling us this information, which we could easily look up. If someone's like, hey, that person scored the most points, I'm like, he didn't. I just looked it up. That's just wrong. They don't want that. And I think efficiency is the thing that describes the most of what we're watching. Defensive efficiency, passing efficiency, scoring efficiency. That is like real fascinating stuff that is a treasure for fans like us. And when they devalue them and we can't even talk about them in a debate in Hell Square, being like, well, you know, Kobe shot a lot, so like other players don't have to shoot as much and they do equal amount of damage. For example, Shaquille O'Neal. Like, that's not a conversation we can have because it's turned cultural, right?
Well, one thing that I think we did well, the book, The Joy of Basketball, which is available
in the printed word. We hand
I think we
illuminated
talked
all
about-
those copies.
I think we contextualized a lot of efficiency discussions in a way that people don't seem interested in doing. You know, people will say, well, AI was inefficient or Marbury was inefficient. It's like, well, guys, like, we have the numbers to compare them to their peers.
Yeah.
You don't have to compare them to today because the game is different.
Right.
And like those conversations to me about like the early 2000s being the dead ball era, I think we did a good job of getting into that in the book. So, you know, I'm not doing this just to drive millions of sales. But I just mean, if people are interested, we talk about this stuff in a way that's going to be slightly better than us riffing about it. But these topics, I think there's plenty of fun stuff to talk about when it comes to efficiency and conversations that people aren't really having. And the same deal with advanced metrics. To me, I think when people said that conversation got toxic, I was like, well, I think it got interesting, but we just didn't talk about the most interesting stuff. We didn't actually go deep. We said, wow, this is hostile. This is just mean. People are being insulting. And I'm like, wait, but there is a really interesting conversation about how role on a team and positionality and players' skill sets sometimes are uniquely tailored for advanced metrics in a way that advanced metrics doesn't account for because they are built to try to be as broad as possible. And I think those are just interesting topics to discuss, but we don't really do that. Like, talking about efficiency is interesting, whether it's contextualizing it historically or talking about, you know, how role comes into it, how teams that, like, you know, have two guys who handle all the scoring versus someone who has a facilitator, how they figure out parts of this puzzle, and how you can turn someone like, you know, De'Aaron Fox, who was not traditionally a hyper efficient player, into like a key cog on the most efficient offense in NBA history. Those are really cool conversations as far as I'm concerned. But again, it feels like it's just being framed as like, what's up, dork? I'm not a dork.
Yeah.
Listen to me. I played the game.
It's an
Shut up,
NBA
nerd.
culture war, right? It's like Mikal Bridges. My whole contention with Mikal Bridges was as soon as he got traded to the Nets with no other player on it other than Cam Thomas, who he knows, we know him too. I'm like, oh, he's gonna be a star. Like, he's already a defensive guy that like is pretty efficient, but you give him a 10% bump in usage, like, he's gonna be an all-star in Brooklyn. And the framing of him as we're watching these playoff games is like, did you just like get that dog? Like, did he just blossom? Is he a happier player just like being a number one? I'm like, it's just usage. This is just math. This is not about his emotions. Seems like a great guy. I'm sad he doesn't wear those bright yellow shoes anymore. Those are great. But I try to think about the important parts of our life that we would want less information for. Like, let's say you're like, my lease is up, I gotta walk around, real estate agent's helping me find like an apartment to live in. If that real estate agent was like, just trust me on this, you don't need to know everything. You'd rather that real estate agent being like, oh, I ran all this information about the neighborhood. You like pizza? Well, there's pizza right there, man. You don't like noise? Well, it's kind of like quieter than these other 4 options. This has like an extra half room, and per square footage, like, you're getting a better deal out of it. You don't have to have a storage space. I want all of this information when I'm looking for an apartment. And we should want that information when we're enjoying anything that we want to put energy into. Of course, casual fans, like I'm a casual football fan. I just don't care. But to listen to like Mina Kimes talk about it, I'm like, yo, I am educated on this fucking game now. Let's go. That in basketball, I think, would benefit the experience.
I also just think that there's some low-hanging fruit that is not being easily devoured by basketball analysts, where you don't even have to get into like numbers. You can just say what's happening and how a player is succeeding without getting bogged down in the numbers. And I mean, just for example, like De'Aaron Fox, I think you could say, De'Aaron Fox improving as a scorer, becoming much more efficient. Even though he's getting to the foul line less, even though he is still not a good three-point shooter, he's become an absolutely dynamic scorer from 2-point range. I think you can say that without being like, well, if you look at his free throw rate, it was this and that, and you look at this and his true shooting percentage, you can just tell people what happened. And I think they still aren't even doing that.
It's always language. And it's always writing.
That's what bums me out. They don't even tell us what's happening, though. They're just like, he's clutch, he's a dog. I'm like, that's cool. You can say that. But then just give us that one other little bit of information where you say, the reason that he has been so awesome this year is because he has just become way better at finishing like around the rim and like mid-range jumpers. He's become lethal from like 16 feet in a way that like he just has not been over the course of his career. He's incredible at finishing from like 3 to 10 feet. You don't even have to get into the nitty gritty. Yeah. Just tell me a little bit more. Just like give me the narrative arc that he is a dog, that he is clutch, and then just be like, but I also can tell you what actually happened here and make me more curious about those things. I just feel like analysts in the NBA don't even really bother.
I mean, I even want a little nitty gritty because I was watching the Nuggets blow out the Timberwolves last night, and Greg Anthony went on. We've heard this before, an ex-player say, in a playoff game, you'd rather get blown out than lose a tight one. And I waited for him to say like, well, it's because like to your point, I wanted him to say like, because you can give examples of why you lost a game that poorly, but if you lose a coin flip, it's kind of unexplainable and it's scarier. Like I wanted something like that. But then if he wasn't going to give us that nuance, I kind of wanted him to say like, so like 60% of the teams that have gotten blown out by more than 30 points come back to win the next two. Like I just wanted something like why. But instead we get kind of like a religious idea, which is like, trust me, the heart knows what the heart knows. And I'm like, that's cool, but like it would help the experience if we just had like one more thing being like, because I have the biggest heart and I've been through this and this is when this happened one time. Like that's all I'm asking for. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. Like it is not hard to have a secondary thought, but when you just throw out primary sources, it's just like, what do we do with this?
Yeah, I'm not even saying you need to give me the exact numbers because that's going to make some people's eyes glaze over. You don't have to say, well, it's true shooting percentage. Like you don't even have to do that.
Right.
Just frame it in very understandable things and give us a little bit more. I mean, that's a funny one, right? The Greg Anthony one, because I'm sure that stats indicate teams that get blown out fare worse in playoff series than teams that lose close.
Because they're not as good.
Because they are typically bad.
The Wolves have a tall hill to climb, yes.
It doesn't mean that it's uniform across the board. We've seen plenty of series that went 7 games where none of the games were that competitive.
Right,
like,
last year.
Blow out. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear more from him on why it feels a way that it most certainly statistically is not true, but it feels a way. And I think that's interesting. Like, tell us why it feels that way. Right. You don't have the numbers to back it up because they are obviously wrong. But tell me why as a player it feels that way. And to me, that's what the players need to do. Instead of players saying, well, here's just a fact. I'm like, tell us about the emotional side. Tell us what it's like to be in that locker room. Tell us why you felt as a player that getting blown out was kind of more acceptable than a close game. Was it just because it hurt less? That you reconciled taking that L midway through the third quarter and took a seat and processed it for the fourth quarter versus thinking you were going to win and having it snatched out of your fingers. Like, just tell me what it's like to be in that locker room, because like we have all played sports on whatever level and felt some of these emotions, but tell me what it's like in that locker room. Tell me what it's like in the pros. And that actually is identifiable. That's relatable stuff. Like, oh yeah, we lost in a rec league game and I felt that same way. It sucked. Just make it relatable as an athlete. And instead of saying, I'm the only one who understands this sport because I played it at a high level.
And
like,
there's
just not convincing.
There's a finite number of people who are good at anything, and there's many games and many announcers, and I'm not picking on Greg Anthony here, Knicks legend, but he states in his broadcast, like, I've been here, I've been in the biggest games, I've been on this stage, and I'm like, fucking amazing, Greg Anthony, like, I've been a fan since UNLV, right? And then all I want for him is to say something I don't agree with, like this idea of the blowout not meaning as much as a tight game. I want him to give me one nugget of motivation. He's been someplace that no other person has been. What motivated him? And he doesn't have to go on into a soliloquy. He could be like, anger. It's anger and embarrassment. And I was always ready after these games. I'm like, fucking cool. That's cool. I statistically, doesn't matter anymore. He's coming from a place of experience and insight. But like, we don't quite get that, nor should we expect it, or I should expect it, because it's hard to be a communicative person, especially on the job. And I think Clyde Frazier does this in a remarkable way, and Mike Breen knows how to bring it out of him. And it's quick, but it's so, I think, profound when he says these small things. And of course he has like posting and toasting and all this stuff. But when he says, I love the thing, you have to be able to handle prosperity as an athlete. It's fucking amazing.
Well, that's why I really enjoy Hubie Brown, because he has a genuine love for the game. You hear him, kind of oohing and eyeing with enjoyment at plays that he's impressed by, and then the disappointment in his voice when a player does something wrong. But it's not anger. It's not calling someone like a pussy. Oh, he doesn't have heart. He doesn't have a dog. He's like, oh, you just got to be better at closing out on that play. You just got to be better. Like it comes from a place of like,
he's a coach.
A coach. He's not necessarily just a pundit. He's not.
Right.
It's a shame to see that happen. Like he's a legend, and obviously he is an older guy, and
there's a reason why he's still on though. He's still sharp.
The same, but he's still great, and I love hearing him because I love his approach to the game in a way that not everyone does. But I feel like there's the announcing. There are some guys who are.
I'm a Van Gundy
fan.
Some
guys who are. Yeah,
I like Van Gundy.
It's more like be your person. Not everyone has to be the same. Not everyone has to be Reddick. Right. Not everyone has to be Barkley. Like there's room for everybody. I just wish sometimes when the conversations are about how, these guys aren't working together because they all want the ball. They can't share the rock. There's not enough scoring to go around. You look and be like, no, the problem is their defense is ass.
Yeah, exactly.
The offense is great. They're killing it offensively, but the defense is bad. Instead of hearing about how Luka and Kyrie can't coexist. I'm like, well, like just be a little more right sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I think the overarching feeling I have is this MVP, I hope Joe wins. Obviously, I love Joel Embiid. But I also love, we've been through this. I like the chaos of a three-peat. Anyway, doesn't matter. And I think the overarching thought I have is we're in a regressive cultural year. And we maybe are this is the elasticity idea. I think we have gone so far into metrics through the light years ahead cliche, Jokic winning 2 MVPs because of his efficiency. I think we're seeing the crab pull the other crab back into the basket a little, and that'll happen. That's okay, but sometimes the arguments about advanced analytics to me feel like a wasted opportunity to talk about what's happening on the court, because we're doing a cultural thing that does not matter, right? Like, there will be nerds who enjoy sports. That's just a fact. There will be not nerds, whatever side you fall on, however you define it. It will always be a source of friction. But to just argue over that friction, I think, is a waste of time.
I mean, I get that efficiency is part of it, but it is just wild that, like, what basketball nerds are talking about is like play type, like spot up shooting, catch and shoot, pick and roll, dribble handoff,
Yeah.
or lineup data. It's not these ideas of like cumulative metrics. Like, people are talking about like literally the granular things that are happening on a basketball court, which is the same stuff that teams are looking at, which is they're using the same websites. They're using, it's the same shit that when offensive coordinators on NBA teams are looking and saying like, well, what was working out there? And they're like, well, this dribble handoff with Sabonis and Fox, that is giving people hell. So we're going to just make that the fulcrum of our offense, and it's going to work.
And advance
like,
that.
look,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, the last one I was going to give an example was like Austin Reeves, good pick and roll ball handler.
Yeah.
Like, he scores at an excellent level doing that, and it did not appear as if Memphis was prepared to defend against that very well, because they didn't, and he ate him up doing that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say before that thought, like, I one advance that I love that will never be popularized is like potential points, potential assists, potential rebounds, potential, because it doesn't exist, and that's a quick gotcha. But like, we all see it during a game. If I was gonna draft or trade for a certain player, I'd be like, can I see their potential stats? If it's a point guard, can I see those potential assists? Because as simple as a play is like open layup blown, I'm like, oh, that happened. That's one assist he doesn't have. And the difference between 9 assists a game and 10 assists a game is like the world. But metrics people know there's not a big difference, but that's a difference of millions of dollars in a contract. So I want to know, like, does he lead to an open dunk where he gets fouled and the player doesn't convert that dunk? Like, that should be an assist. So I need to know this stuff if we're gonna hang our hat on this player for 5 years moving forward. But to your last point about like defending a pick and roll, or like Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns not having the stretchability to defend Jokic. Like, there's ways to talk about that with numbers, but also because we can see it in plain sight in game one, doesn't mean there isn't metrics to describe it. Information is good. Don't buy a stock without knowing the data. That's all.
Yeah, I also think like it doesn't even the eye test versus analytics is just not even a thing. Like,
They're the same thing.
for anybody who's serious about basketball. I just mean you also wouldn't say, oh, well, these numbers say this, so it's 100% true without watching the games, though. Like, you have to know how these things are occurring, because it's not in a vacuum. Scheme is different, players are different, etc. Anyway, we all know this. Playoffs started. Got 8 series going on right now, of varying interest. Are there the biggest? The first day of the weekend was wonderful, right? We had for our agendas, for the most part, we had a Sixers win, we had a Knicks win. We can talk about this in a second.
Fun game.
And then we had a Sacramento Kings win, which was extremely exciting.
Cool too. Yeah.
I mean, you're a Golden State sympathizer. I don't know where you fall on that. That outcome.
I'm agnostic
but that was
about
really
everything.
fun.
Come on, man.
That was really
Oh.
it was fun. It was fun.
Loved it.
But I'm getting to yesterday. There were some unfun elements. We had a John Morant injury, we had a Tyler Hero injury, and we had Giannis hurt.
Yeah.
We had 3 injuries, and there were also some good games as well. Like, no doubt about it. Like, there were fun games, and there was a couple that weren't as great. But out of these 8 games we've had so far, though, in the playoffs, what do you think about this conversation about charges? That was the main takeaway from Sunday action, was that the NBA needs to do something about charges. And this was obviously anecdotal, but because Giannis landed on his back in a really gnarly fall and then exited the game shortly thereafter. He only played a part of the first quarter as they fell to the Heat, they being his Milwaukee Bucks. And then you also had John Morant, my Bucks. You had John Morant hurting his hand on a similar style of play. Where do you stay on this? Where do you stand on this charge debate?
Dangerous play. Athletes just going ham. No pun intended to the Lakers coach. But like athletes performing at such a high level and danger being an element there, I don't think it's a great, safe play. You know how I feel about players being put in these situations. But man, like as I saw those plays go down, I'm like, Ja plays with this reckless abandon. Giannis, that's why they're wonderful, right? That's why we love them. But like when the angles present, like you could see it coming. When the angles present themselves, I'm kind of like a little bit on the offensive player too. Like I don't like it whenever a player dives for a ball. I just hate it. I don't believe in hustle. I don't believe in that optic being valuable to me. I like it when players throw down thunderous dunks and they're trying to do that, but if this rule is in place and if blocking is a thing, these charges are a thing, then offensive players have to adjust. And sometimes they don't. I'm not saying Ja or Giannis couldn't do a thing about it or something about it. I'm saying if we're going to turn it into an overall discussion about should this play exist, some of me thinks that like, but it does exist, there needs to be an adjustment from the offensive player.
Well, to me, the biggest issue is not necessarily on legal charges. It's that players are trying to take charges instead of defending. And
they get rewarded for it.
Right. I'm not blaming the players. I'm saying the issue here is with the rules or with the officiating, however you want to do it. But when players are incentivized to slide under other guys who are in the air, whether it's smart or not is besides the point. Like it's you know, it is terrible for basketball to have these kind of plays. They're awful. Like they aren't fun to watch. They get players hurt. They stink. They're taking charges like that is not part of unorganized basketball.
And the rule doesn't expect this to be at this high of a level. I think being like, hey, if the defensive player has position and the offensive player runs into them, that's a charge. That sounds fine. But then when you get to this level of execution, you're just like, ooh, this is problematic.
Yeah, I agree. The idea of the charge, as far as I can tell, is not based on players like John Morant and guys using, gather dribbles to basically be on, a course for the basket and elevating from a half a step inside the lane.
Yeah.
And even the adaptations they've made, with like the restricted area, maybe that needs to be bigger.
Yep.
I mean, to me, the biggest issue is just that, like, there needs to be a way for guys to defend people driving without incentivizing people to slide under guys who are already in the process of taking off. Because, like, it also comes from, like, Duke and just, like, awful stuff. Like,
it's the idea of hustle.
Duke defending by taking charges. It was just made them such a detestable, awful team. And again, we can say it was strategically smart to do, but like it does stink. It is just an incredibly lame part of basketball that is compounded by having guys in the air falling like 9 feet to the ground on their back. So like I don't know what the solution is though. I mean, do you make the restricted area larger? Maybe, I don't know. But how do you help the defense too?
Yeah.
Like, how do you allow guys to defend against someone driving is it just verticality? Because is it relaxing what we consider a block, that like some defensive contact is totally fine? I don't know what a good answer is.
I don't either, and especially in a season where people are curious if there's too much scoring. And there's not too much scoring because defenses are lazy. This has been sussed out. There's too much scoring because the offense dictates a possession, and it's just too sophisticated. It's like, I think somebody on the radio said it's as if in his prime, Barry Bonds batted 1 through 9, but could also pick the pitcher pitching to him. Like, that's what offensive basketball is now. And the defenses are insane. Like, some of these defenders are wildly great. Like, some of my favorite players, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brook Lopez, I don't know, whatever. Everybody, the obvious guys. But they're at a disadvantage for sure. And to me, you don't want to necessarily increase the restricted area, because that leads to more free throws, more scoring. Like, it helps the offense even more. So I am almost under the impression that offensive players just have to adjust. This is like this weird thing. Like, if you keep on, if the result is going to be catastrophic, then players have to be aware of that. I don't know. That's all.
Right, but the problem is to say, well, you shouldn't take off in the air because you're going to risk injury as a result of players sliding beneath you illegally. You know what I mean?
Or within the rules. Right. I mean, but there's a lot of actions on the court that aren't that players execute to avoid risk. Like, players adjust really quickly, I think. So, like,
but what I'm saying is that, like, if you have a clear path to take off for like a windmill jam, and someone slides under you, in which is going to be called a clear foul, he's sliding, like, he is at fault. So it's tough to say, well, the offensive player shouldn't do that play because a defensive player is going to make a dangerous decision to get beneath him. That's tough to put the impetus on the offensive guy there.
It is tough, but I think spatially, if you see this defensive player sliding over, especially in this playoffs where they're not going to change the rules, like, you gotta compensate for the angles, and maybe you don't go up for it. Sucks, but maybe you don't go up for that, like, poster dunk that we all want to see. It's like, I don't know what to say. Like, you just have to mitigate your risk there as an offensive player.
Yeah,
it sucks. It's not the optimal way to play the game, but this game isn't optimized. None of this is optimized, right?
I hear that. I also just don't think that, overall speaking, not talking about how, I don't think anyone should change the way they play because of charges immediately. I don't think someone should go out next game and be like, I need to worry about guys sliding beneath me. I just feel like you
but if a dude is sliding, I hope Emmanuel quickly doesn't go up for like a poster dunk if the angle and the guy's sliding over him, just like, if you can spin around it. Like, the beauty of a player like Jokic is, like, he's never at risk of that kind of thing. Like, he's kind of earthbound, like, but we saw his footwork.
I agree. Of course. I just mean, I don't think you can ask an NBA player playing this hard with this energy at this level, this intensity, to say, also take into account like a defender sliding in a new way that you haven't been yesterday. I think that's too hard. And this to me needs to be solved at a institutional level by the NBA, and there's nothing to do about it right now. Like, guys are just going to get hurt if they get unlucky, and people are just going to keep having to deal with the ramifications of, to me, what is kind of a flawed rule. I don't have great responses to it, but when you talk about behavior shifting, I think it's easier to shift to change how a defender defends. If you say, guess what, charges aren't going to do anything, like, they're not going to ever call it. Like, you can jump, you can get in their way, you're never going to get a charge. So, like, standing there with your hands over your balls with your shoulders back is a way to get dunked on. So play different defense. I think that behavior can change faster than, say, someone who comes off a screen and sees daylight.
Man, I hate it too, but like, you have to protect the defender. You have to give them a chance. To your point, right? Also, I'm curious because I'm trying to think of another situation. There's a few, but I can't quite think of any. I mean, famously Bogut and Amari, but that was kind of different too. Horrible luck. Arguably the two biggest stars in the NBA go down this way in a short period of time. That is like atrocious luck and a disaster for the NBA if they're out for a long time. But I'm not sure if it's an anomaly or if it's a trend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think charges get taken like that often in the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that these stats are totally true, but from what I can tell, it looks like the Oklahoma City Thunder led the league in charges taken with 87. Like, granted,
that's not that
threat.
many. Yeah.
No, not at all. Like, you know, granted, the threat of the charge is probably just as, important as other ones. And now I'm seeing some other numbers here. No, I'm sorry. These appear to be playoff stats. Hold on. I'm very close to having them here. These are only playoff. I'm trying to get them from the NBA. But so even here in the postseason, right? The only team that had multiple charges drawn yesterday were over the weekend were the Heat and the Sixers, and they had 2.
Right.
This is just not something that is happening that much overall. Right. So, to me, if you're going to change the rules to switch this up, it's not going to have that big of a bearing on the defense because I just don't think that many teams are basing their defense on taking charges.
I don't think so either. And I just think they should leave it alone, which sucks. It's not perfect, but like they have to give the defense a chance. And sometimes a game swings on these 1 or 2 possessions. Like that's a huge swing sometimes, a charge, right? So like none of them are great. Like they're all just kind of like grown, like, yeah, totally. According to the rule, we have to call that. But the defense has to be given a chance, and when these acrobatic dunkers and drives to the hoop are dangerous, like we either have to live with that or whatever.
I hear you. I just think maybe the answer is coming up with a way to make blocks, less easily called. That's like, well, you're moving. This requires sort of reframing what a block is, but maybe it's like, well, you can be moving, but it's the offensive player is initiating the contact. Like you can, I think you can still let people defend. You just don't want guys there trying to stand in one place and get hit because it isn't happening that much, but they're just very violent plays that as we saw like yesterday, are ones that can just lead to injury. But it's also a freakish thing to have 2 injuries on one day due to charges being taken.
But you make But you make a good point. What if it's a series of concessions? What if, to your point, you take away the opportunity for the defense to draw a charge? It's like, okay. But what if it's international rules being like, now you can block shots on the way down, and we can like kind of like reimagine like the game in a bigger sense than just one action, right? Because if the defense is going to be at a disadvantage, we need to give them an advantage somewhere else. Maybe it's a different 4-second violation in the paint, 5 seconds. Give them a few more seconds.
Checking.
I mean, hand checking is stupid, but like, yeah, what if they can park under the basket longer, a second or 2 longer? I love international ball because I like players rejecting shots I think on the way down you're allowed to do that sometimes.
No, they can do it when it hits the rim first. Like you can.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
You can swipe it off the rim if it makes contact. Like
I love that.
I think there's both offensive and defensive goaltending.
Right.
Are legal.
Yeah, you just can't have Gobert swiping 3-point attempts. That's stupid. But like swatting 3-point
Just standing
attempts.
there, like doink.
I mean, I kind of love it, but like that's not how we understand the game. You know, someone has to box him out to make sure he doesn't do that.
By the way, I have not heard people mention this. I saw our buddy Lucian the other night, and
The King Lucian,
the
yes.
God. Shout out to Luch, and he was like, "Well, all this talk of like moving 3-point lines back and stuff. Why don't they just make the rim a little smaller?" I was like, "It's a good point. No one's really brought that up. Just like an inch smaller. Just make it harder to shoot."
Luch helped us with all of our tournaments, but especially one tournament that had double rims. That's not fun to watch, man. I'd rather them push it back because the degree of difficulty is much harder with a smaller rim. I get it, but like, it's not fun. The double rims, that was not a fun shooting day.
No, they should not have double rims. No, I'm not into that. All right, so out of these playoffs, I don't know what, one game. I don't know if there's any conclusions to jump to. It's been kind of fun watching, the development or lack of development in some of these young guys who are, going to be the face of the league. Ideally, going
Whether they
forward.
like it or not, it's an age thing.
Yeah. Hero getting hurt's a bummer.
Sucks.
I have not been really, RJ Barrett leading the Knicks to that exciting victory of the Cavs by being taken off the floor in the last 2 minutes.
It was crazy. Night and day, man. Wild. Even though he had a bunch of steals. Wild.
He actually played well in ways that he does not typically do.
That's right.
He had some nice passes. I think he had 6 assists. There was a few that were good too. Like he threw like a sharp diagonal pass to the wing. He did like a little kind of through the legs, in transition pass where he left it for a Randall 3. He had a lob or 2 to Mitchell Robinson. I thought he passed well. Mm-hmm. He had some steals, but man, overall, you can't have him on the court. And we've said this before, but the Knicks are about to be in a situation where they kind of have reached an impasse.
I know.
Are you more concerned with winning this series or not offending RJ or / getting him playoff experience because you view him as an important component to the team? There is a fork in the road here, I think.
This is my question. What does New York want? Exactly what you said. Do they want to develop their young guys and get them this valuable experience? Or do they actually want to win this series? I think they should try to win this series because you don't really find yourself in this situation that much. I am grateful that they're just here. I don't think they should use this as development. I think they should try to win. And they can. If they remove RJ, because he is not an NBA caliber player, let alone a playoff caliber player. There were some possessions where he was running a fast break and he had a man on him with, I think, Grimes just trailing him. Just fumbled the ball out of bounds. They're not guarding him. As soon as he sits, they make a run. It's pretty clear that he needs more time. If he's going to be the face of the NBA moving forward, maybe not today. Maybe if developing him is a worldview, my worldview is he has time to improve. It doesn't have to be this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel one of the more noticeable differences between regular season and the playoffs are that teams' scouting plans are a little more distinct. I think during the regular season, there are certain players that they're not going to guard it from the perimeter. There are certain guys that they're going to try to attack. But in the playoffs, it's certainly more focused, where the amount of players that get openly ignored are just higher. Yeah. No, we're not going to let this other guy do this thing. So you're just going to we're going to sacrifice that. And I think that gets a little more strict. Or every time down, we're attacking this person. Or we are designing a game plan to attack this guy and that guy whenever they are on the court. until you take them off, or we're going to just leave this guy alone behind the three-point arc and he can take as many threes as he wants because we just don't believe that he's going to take enough or make enough to beat us.
Dude,
and I think that's
Steve Kerr ran a
that's
box
a noticeable
and one.
thing.
Yeah, to your point. Sorry to interrupt. Steve Kerr ran a box and one against Malik Monk. Basically left a bunch of people open, being like, it's just Malik Monk that we're worried about. To your point, like, shit gets tight in the playoffs, man.
You just become far more comfortable with what you're willing to sacrifice than you are in the regular season. Like, look, we are down to lose this game, but it's going to have to be because of this thing that we just view as fairly unlikely.
Right.
And, when I look at, the Knicks during that first game, I'm like, they aren't guarding Barrett along the perimeter. They just aren't. They are
They shouldn't.
vaguely around him, and then they overhelp and they just leave him there. So I think this is not to shit on RJ. It's more to say, well, if this is how the Cavs are going to play him, you need to be pretty comfortable with RJ taking a ton of threes. And considering he's shot about 25% over the last month and change from there, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with that kind of situation. If you compare him to someone like a Matisse Thybulle being left open, it's like, well, what's our trade-off here, right? Thybulle is an elite defender. We need him at the point of attack. If they're going to leave him alone, then we need to put him somewhere else. But with RJ, you're like, what are we getting from him? Are we getting great rebounding? Are we getting great defense? Are we getting great playmaking? Like, what are we sacrificing in order to have him on the floor?
Yeah. And a lot of these young players, I just want to go through the list, like Anthony Edwards, Tyler Hero, RJ, Trey Young, Austin Reeves, Maxey, Jordan Poole, have Scotty Barnes, have a lot of these thoughts tethered to them of what you're talking about with RJ. Where is the player development with these guys, and what are we willing to have them kind of work out in real time, And Jordan Poole, he is an electrifying offensive player at times, but a real tough defender to have on the court. You need to accommodate for his weaknesses. Trey Young as well. Barnes can't shoot. It's tough to find, when we're dealing with this generation of stars, like Giannis, Embiid, Doncic, who's not great defensively, but these guys are formed ideas of a player. Of course they're not perfect. Of course, Jokic, not perfect defensively at all. But what you're willing to deal with, what you're willing to deal with him, because the trade-off is maybe the best offensive center in the history of the game. And these young players like Anthony Edwards, it sounds crazy, but when he's not right, whether that be injury or he's just working on he's not ready, I'm not sure if you're willing to trade off him playing all those minutes when you're in a playoff series.
By the way, not to harp on Barrett, but looking at that game one, when he was on the floor, the Knicks got outscored by 25 points per 100 possessions. They had an offensive rating of 93.4 and an offensive rating of 118.6. They got absolutely smoked with him on the court. Smoked. And this was in the game when he shot poorly, but he actually, as I said, did some things that were out of character good. Mm-hmm. And not in the way of Westbrook doing,
crazy,
going 3 of 19, but having an enormous game-winning plays. Barrett did not do that.
Right.
When he was off the court in 32 possessions,
watch your mouth. Is that what he said? Watch your mouth.
He was a plus 60.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the Knicks were plus 60.
Right.
Just night and day.
I mean, there you go with your analytics again, dork. But the the evidence is there, but if you don't want to do the on-off splits, if you just watch him play, you're just like, you can't play him, man. The Knicks are deep. I mean, Quickly was having a terrible game, but like the Knicks are deep enough. And apologies to Obi Toppin. I like the way he's progressed this season. I was really down on him in the middle of the season because defensively he's like never going to be a star. I think he gets a little in his head and he wanders the Elysian fields of the defensive end of the court a bit between heaven and hell. But if he can convert and hit some corner threes, like absolutely play him. Like he's efficient, and he provides a spark if you just use him the right way, which is like finishing damn offensive plays, which is a joy to watch. And he pumps up the team. Just talking about emotion, great. But like RJ, you watch him and it's clear as day. As soon as they kind of give him the rock, he dribbles the ball off his foot. He makes a bad pass. He makes an average pass, and the Knicks are like tied again. He steps off, the Knicks go up 7. He comes back, tied again. Steps off, Brunson takes over, the Knicks up 10. It's like, you don't need advanced stats for that.
No. And also, this is a case where what we're talking about is that the eye test and the numbers are in complete harmony.
Yeah, totally.
You look at the numbers, they are significantly better with him off the court. That has been the case for the regular season. It was the case in game 1. And you watch him play, he doesn't have object permanence. He doesn't know where his teammates are. He doesn't know where defenders are. He takes bad shots. He turns the ball over too much, even though that's not even his main issue. His main issue is that he takes bad shots. He's not a good shooter, so he fucks up the spacing, and he's a poor defender.
Right.
Right. Those are just the realities of RJ. And I'm not trying to even like just dog him out here. It's that the Knicks continuing to play him this scale of minutes is just weird. And there's an article, I think it was Zach Cram from The Ringer put together, talking about how most lineups that get a lot of burn in the NBA are good. If it works, you keep doing it. And it's almost this thing there, it doesn't make sense until you think about it. Like, well, how can that be? How are the vast majority of lineups that play a lot of minutes good? How can that be the case? And it's just because lineups that are bad get played less. And there's a zillion of those. But the ones that people keep going back to are successful, with a notable anomaly of Thibs. He is a total outlier in that he continues to give big minutes to lineups that are not that successful. And this is really just the RJ Barrett issue.
Yeah.
Like, if they won't take him off the court and they continue to play him 25, 35 minutes a game, it's going to be tough to beat Cleveland. But before we get out of here, let's just talk a little bit about that series. So, game 1, Knicks blow a 10-point lead late. Donovan Mitchell catches fire. It's on the verge of being an absolutely crippling, just brutal loss that would have been incredibly disheartening no matter what Greg Anthony would say. Or actually, going along with what Greg Anthony would say.
Right.
I retract that.
Right.
How do you feel right now? Are you feeling like the Knicks, now that they have stolen the home court advantage, they're up 1-0, you think they got this?
No, but I think they have a good chance at winning. And however big agnostic game I talk, I'll be disappointed if they lose. But I really like this Cleveland team. But the Knicks are great on the road, so this was always on the table. Like, I think it was well discussed that they're probably going to steal one. Home court advantage was not that valuable in this series, and game 1 went their way. I thought, even though this is my New York hubris, but even though New York kind of lost some sizable leads, I don't think that game was as close as we thought. It could have, the coin flip could have not gone their way at the end, but the Knicks just looked better. And I don't think Evan Mobley is going to have that much trouble. Yo, he's skinny. Like, can we talk about Julius Randle just kind of bodying him all game? I love Evan Mobley.
We can talk about it as much as you want.
I love Evan Mobley. I think he should be a depoy. He was small. there was a lot of possessions where Randall just kind of ran him over legally, like not committing fouls, and he wasn't hitting outside shots, and that's where his value may come into play more in game 2. But I was kind of surprised at the twin towers of him and Jared Allen not quite having this like thunder and lightning effect. Like Randall expressed his size a little bit.
I mean, look, I think it's cheap to point out a couple plays.
For sure.
Well, the game would have been different if that happened. The Cavs did like straight up smoke a couple layups. Granted, the Knicks missed a few as well. And that
many.
You know, but there were plays that could have turned the tide of the game either direction.
Yeah.
Where you can single out and be like, dude, Rubio straight up missed a layup. Like he missed a layup. If that goes in, you know, he probably misses that 1 out of 100 times. But like you can do that on both sides, and you can do that with every play here and there. If someone doesn't dribble the ball off their toe,
a technical foul.
What I enjoy about
exactly
what I enjoy about the Knicks is that there is a humanism to their team where they make really egregious back-breaking errors a lot that just feel.
I love them.
It feels like I feel that they're just mortifying and so punishing that like they feel like, all right, well, we have no shot. Not after making
Julius
that
Randle experience
kind of play.
Yeah, and
they just kind of plug along and just wade on through it and end up getting a win. Like, look,
offensive rebounds, man.
Yeah, offensive rebounds, just kind of hanging in there, and you know, Randall did not have a good game.
No,
overall, but you know, he had a bunch of turnovers. He didn't shoot that well, but he kept them in it when Brunson was out.
Yeah.
Like he had like 15 points or whatever it was.
He hadn't played
10 points,
in weeks.
12 points in the first quarter. Yeah. But they needed him to put up some points when Brundog was out, and he did. And not an overall great game, but he was out there just sort of exerting Randalldom over people, like slapping guys in the face, elbowing him in the head, shoving him around. Like he really did sort of dominate the game in a physical sense.
Got in Mitchell's head. Well, he got in Mitchell's head psychologically. Mitchell tried to goad him into a mental spark, right? And then Randall's put up his hands and smiled and like, this is spicy. I like it. I don't know. Yeah, to your point, not the most beautiful basketball, but like it is the Knicks. I mean, the beautiful basketball is out west, right?
I thought the highest quality ball in terms of entertainment value was that Golden State Sacramento Kings game 1. The speed, the passing, the shooting, you know, from Fox, Malik Monk, Curry. That game was extremely cool. I really enjoyed watching it. And, you know, the Sacramento King fan base was pretty awesome. You know, they were like so fired up for their first game and first postseason game in, I think, 16, 17 seasons. And I think they just had that Rochester energy out there. You know, the Rochester Kings. You just saw the championship DNA, the energy of garbage plates and RXK Nephew were really imbued within
what they're saying.
The Kings win.
That Maloof energy. I really love those Weber, Stojakovic, Vlade teams. And what I remember from them was the atmosphere at Sacramento home games. And we're back, baby. We're all we're in the time machine. And like it's crazy how long it takes. So I'm gonna get annoying here. Like Ronadive is an owner that's been maligned quite a bit, and like thinks he's maybe smarter, or people maybe take his intellectualism the wrong way. In my opinion, he thinks he wanted a cherry picker kind of strategy. He was famous for coaching his daughter's basketball team to do full court press, and they went undefeated, I believe. So he thinks he had hacked the system, which he had not. Famously, like, we believe in you, Stauskas, right? And to see him light the beam yesterday was kind of like, I thought of the idea of karma a little bit, because a lot of political trolls, whenever something goes in Trump's favor, they're just like karma, and I'm like, well, when did we start and where do we end with this? Because like Ronadive certainly doesn't have the last laugh, but he kind of built this team. And they're fucking good. Like, Herder is good. And I like the tension, because there was a few seasons where they tried to follow the Golden State model with their draft picks, and it didn't quite work out. But here they are, head to head with an aging Golden State team, and just like this beautiful kind of offensive pace. I really think sometimes like we get a matchup that is notable, and this one is fucking good, man.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to give Ronadive like credit for designing this team.
He's here. He's the boss.
Well, what I would also will say is that like he hired the people who built it.
Sure.
Like
sure.
he clearly signed off on Mike Brown, and he clearly is the one who said, we're going to bring in these former Rockets guys. We trust their vision. I don't know that he was instrumental in saying, all right, let's trade Halliburton for Sabonis. This is going to work. But he clearly was aware of it, and it was really sold to him in a way that he said, yeah, let's give this a whirl. So no doubt that you can give him sort of ambient overall credit as the person who runs this organization and owns it. I do think it is kind of cool that he was a former Golden State guy, and he wanted to build, as you mentioned, his version of the unstoppable offense. And and his original vision did not come to fruition, where he was trying to build around like Buddy Hield and Nick Stauskas as his, Curry,
Willie Cauley-Stein,
Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
And then there was the chubby dude that they drafted as their Draymond, who ended up going to Atlanta. Like that vision of like of a zombie Golden State Warriors did not happen. But what you said is true. Here they are. They had the best offense in history. They're playing Golden State, and they won the first game. So to your overall message, I'm with. Like, he did not get the last laugh, but he got like a nice last smile. He got an early laugh. Like, whatever that metaphor goes, he is going against the team that he was trying to usurp, the team that he wanted to beat in a certain way. And that blueprint took game one. So, like, shout out to him.
And what a strange game, right? Like, I like them pulling Keegan Murray just after, just playing him 15 minutes. Herder did not have he was 0 for 5 from 3. But, like, that team is interesting. Sabonis didn't even have a great game. 5 for 17. 0 for 1 from 3. Good rebounds. Only 2 assists. Like, that's not his game. That's not him at his best. But, like, Malik Monk catching fire like that, are these two teams, the Golden State Warriors and the Kings, good enough defensively to make a deep run?
I don't know. I think what was most surprising to me was that Golden State, who has been a very good defensive team when they're intact for the last couple of years, we view them as this offensive juggernaut because of Curry, because of Clay, but really their deal has been being excellent on defense. That's kind of what their claim to fame has been. And the Kings lit them up, and that was without Herder even making a 3.
Yeah.
So
they scored 126.
to me this Golden State team, like, their defense this season is not like it was last year, because they were the top rated team last year, and definitely part of that was Wiggins' absence and stuff like that. So I don't know that this Golden State team is. I don't know if they're a real contender or not. I can't tell. We've
Full
seen
strength.
the lineup data where they're still at full strength. They're really good. I don't know if their defense can get back up to where it was last year, like being hyper elite when they are finally intact. I just don't know how aging has deteriorated that team. Granted, less than a calendar year ago, they shut down the Celtics and won a title. I'm not writing them off in the least.
No.
I'm just saying it's hard to know with some of these teams like Phoenix that they just haven't been together enough. Golden State, we know what they've done in the past. We just haven't seen them do it like that recently. Can they stop the greatest offense in NBA history? Maybe.
That was a close game, man. Yeah.
But they couldn't. They also couldn't defend Fox or Monk without fouling. So I don't know.
I know. I mean, I think the action is in the West this week because there's three kind of unknown teams. In the Sacramento Kings, well, actually the Warriors, because you're getting GP2 kind of back, and Wiggins finally is back. So like we're not quite sure what they are with these two guys. Maybe incredible. Like, I don't know. So we'll see. And then you have the Lakers with the resurgence or the rise of Austin Reeves, your boy. What did they call him? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Just kind of an amazing nickname. And then the Kings, who we haven't seen on this stage yet. Like, I'm really looking forward to watching these series play out, man, because like the seeding is one thing, and that's why people doubted the Nuggets. Like, they're number one, but these teams going in seem to be as formidable as the Nuggets are now. So I think the action's in the West. I'm most curious about that, and it helps because I'm a night owl, so I get to watch deep into the evening in the East Coast.
Yeah, I felt like the Eastern Conference games, Sixers, Brooklyn, despite Bridges having an electrifying first half, that series does not strike. That series does not strike me as being one that's going to be that interesting.
Stay healthy.
Could be wrong. But overall, the Nets with an effective field goal percentage of 60% and still getting drubbed, that does not bode well. I felt like the talent differential was kind of startling. You're like, Embiid's just too good for any of their team. Harden's too good. Bridges is cool, but he's just carrying some guys. Like,
yeah, I know.
They have some decent players, but it's some guys. Like, Dinwiddie's a guy. Curry's a guy.
Cam Johnson's kind of a guy. I like him. But
he's a good player. As I said, I'm not a DFS believer. I think he's okay. He's a dude.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then you look at the Sixers, like, for all we say about Tobias Harris, he's as good as those dudes.
Like, for sure.
You know what I mean? He is. Yeah. Like, guys are like, oh, why is this dude even on the court? He's as good as pretty much everyone other than Tobias Harris. I'm sorry, other than Mikal Bridges on Brooklyn. So that series, the worm may turn. It is just not one that is that compelling to me from a stylistic standpoint or a competitive standpoint through game one. And ditto for Boston Hawks. Like, fuck the Hawks for making us watch them.
Yeah, I'm so annoyed at the Hawks. Like, this team's John Collins' ass team. Yeah, man. Like, oh my God. Greatest music city in the history of America. Not so much 2023 basketball city. Man.
Are you sure? Are you sure it's the greatest music city?
No. Why? Who you got?
I think Memphis. I'm a Memphis guy.
That's completely fair. I mean, apples and oranges, but it's down to those two, right?
I feel like those would be, and then I think someone could make a strong argument for Chicago and New York would be the other ones.
No, not close. Chicago. Did you see that they're doing like a techno museum, I guess, in Europe, and they kind of omitted all the Chicago house guys?
That's insane. I feel
they
like,
invented.
I just think Chicago and Detroit, their arguments are based on.
I mean Detroit techno guys. My bad. Yeah.
But I think you'd put right. It would be like their involvement in like electronic music as well, but also going back to like Northern Soul, also like contemporary rap. Like, they've got good claims to fame. I just might go Memphis off of personal taste, but those are your key cities, right?
Sadly, I wouldn't put New York in there, But like whatever, Velvet Underground, Talking Heads, big deal.
I mean, just rap overall.
No,
Like,
but this is
creating hip hop though. I just mean,
doesn't matter, right? Like, but I would argue, artists like Outkast reinvented hip hop in such a huge way that dusted New York City.
that might be fair, but I'm sorry, not Rochester.
Rochester.
Rochester controls it today.
That's right.
Rochester
that's right.
owns rap over like 2020 to 2023. Duh.
That's fair. That's
Iron
fair.
Fist. I was saying New York though did have a virtual monopoly on it though, outside of like some Philly
Wu-Tang,
stuff,
Bad
some LA
Boy.
stuff.
Are we
saying
talking
even
like
before
late
that, like,
'90s?
I'm saying you go from like Sugar Hill Gang up until like early 90s. That was like, it was a long
Huge.
stretch where it was just
Huge.
everything that came out, and then it started dispersing. But anyway,
Yo, I was at
go on
the
with your,
park.
go on. You.
I was at the park the
You're
other
praising
day.
Atlanta.
No, I was at the park the other day, and I don't mean to sound like a creep, but I take a look at who's in the park swinging their kids and stuff. Stretch Armstrong, man, that guy looks great. I don't want to speculate how old he is, but like one of the architects of New York City music was just chilling there with his kid. He was wearing all like white, like athletic gear. He's wearing nice shoes. Shout out to Stretch Armstrong. That's all.
He's out here doing his thing.
I mean, I was like, yo. That's it. I was like, yo.
Just you were like, yo. There's
Well, like-
Stretch Armstrong.
In the 90s, I would have rolled up to him and been like, yo, big fan. But now in 2023, you can't do that. Social media has squashed all that. You just gotta let him chill. I didn't even want to look in his direction.
As you should.
Right. Right.
But yeah, you were saying this Atlanta series unwatchable.
Yeah, fuck this team a little bit. Where's Trae Young gonna go? I love Trae Young. I like DeJounte Murray more than you, but like, I'm done with this team, man. Like they have no swag.
Well, I think this was the sort of tragedy of the Eastern Conference this year was that, the Nets being disassembled because Joseph Tsai's ego took a must-watch team and replaced it with one that's pretty dreary. I mean, again, we can argue about whether those moves were good for the long term, but certainly turning a team that won 18 of 20 and looked like a formidable contender into the team that we saw as a 6 seed play against the Sixers is not good for our collective entertainment, nor as New Yorkers, the idea that we can't go and just watch Kyrie and KD play locally.
I know.
Like that was under discussed, I think, and maybe because most media is like Boston based or LA based and is not about New York City.
Chicago, yeah.
The big tragedy of them trading those guys is we couldn't watch them. We can't just go over to Barclays and watch one of the greatest scorers, if not the greatest scorer in history, score points, or watch Kyrie handle the ball, or when Simmons was healthy, be this weird defensive tank that's sprinting around the court. Like, we were just deprived of a team that's really entertaining to watch that was just a G train away. So the Eastern Conference not having Brooklyn is a bummer. And then now we're watching Atlanta and Toronto and Barnes not really taking a jump. And that took Toronto out of there. Lonzo Ball not being part of Chicago. It felt like the bottom half of that Eastern playoff bracket kind of just deteriorated.
And I need a second thought. I can't just dismiss the Hawks. The reason why I'm not that interested in the Hawks and the Bulls and the Raptors are no longer here, but like, is because I don't think this team is going to have this form for much longer. Whether they win or lose, they're not. Neither team is going to go far, but I think they're at a point where they're good. They're in the playoffs, but both teams are looking to reconfigure their point of view. And it's no fun watching a team at that state. To your point, the Nets were so great because this was the final form. This was the final boss of a team. They just needed to like spruce themselves up a bit, dust off their shoulders and go into the playoffs. They were done. And I thought this was the beginning of a team that was going to maybe make a run 2, 3, 4 years. KD's contract. But the Hawks look like they're already on the way out. They don't seem to like each other very much. John Collins has been rumored to have been on the trading block for 2 seasons now. There's rumors that Trey isn't happy. DeJounte is kind of a surly guy by nature. There's no joy in that team currently.
Yeah, I think you nailed upon kind of one of the joys of the playoffs is seeing teams that are, on various stages of this, parabola, or parabola? Is that right?
I don't know. What are you trying to say? Speak on, Schreier.
Well, I'm just saying you have this. Let's say it's a bell curve, right? And when you're at the peak, you are at your best, and those teams, let's say those are contenders, right? And they have that rise, and then they have that fall. And when you look at a team like the current incarnation of the Hawks, they've plateaued. They don't look like a team that is rising towards being a title winner. As you said, they look like one that will be sort of splintered apart soon. But when you look at someone like the Kings, like, oh, these guys are on the way up. We don't know what they're going to be capable of. They're still young. They're still adding pieces. There's an orthodoxy. They're trying to do something different. They're on the upswing. And you look at the Warriors and say, well, these guys are just older. They won it last year. We know they are a formidable opponent. They can beat you. They might win this year, but they are on the downslide just in terms of age. And that's why it's a compelling matchup. When, the OKC were a precocious young team and they took on the Lakers.
That was fun.
That was a really, really fun because it was like, oh, this is, an empire being threatened, an empire in jeopardy from some young up-and-comers who are,
just getting
heaving, shooting arrows, from at the castle walls, and they're gathering their strength.
Right.
Hawks don't feel like any of that shit.
No. Sadly. I know. And there's, I hate the narrative. I mean, this doesn't matter, but like the Sixers made them look like they were good back when we were mad at that series. And I'm like, they were kind of good, but like personality shift. I always talk about metrics. I want there to be the metric of like likability and surliness and all of these things because I like John Collins as a player. Like, there's a reason why they've been trying to get him off their team for a while. And there's a reason why Pop didn't want to retain DeJounte Murray. He's the type of player that the Spurs want. He's pretty young, I think. Yeah, I mean, the first round of the NBA playoffs shouldn't be interesting throughout. So it comes with the territory, but you are 100% right in that the most interesting team, the Nets, are no longer here.
Yeah, it's rough, and as I said, I think it took the wind out of the Eastern Conference a little bit because even with the Heat winning Game 1, the fact that it was tied to a Giannis injury makes me almost less excited about that series.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's going to go longer, or Giannis might be out, and like, what if the Heat win because Giannis misses the next 2 games? Like, that sucks. That doesn't make me happy.
We do not want these teams to move
on. No, I want the Heat out of here. And I like the Heat players. I like Spo. I like Miami culture. Not the whole narrative. That's
like
super tiresome. But I mean, I like I like going to games there. I like the city of Miami. I got no problem with Miami except for Officer Haslam in the mix, just narking it up, and us pretending that that's respectable.
Real talk, though. I don't want the Kings to advance. I really like the Kings. I want the Golden State Warriors to kind of take this to the conference finals a little bit. Because this is kind of... I love Steph Curry.
Because I want the Golden State Warriors to lose, and they will finally be exposed as a fraud.
After 4 championships, finally. We'll know their true form.
Now we know. You lost to the Kings? The Rochester Kings? The Royals of Rocktown?
Owned by Harrison Barnes. Well, you know what's not washed? The 400th episode of Cookies Hoops.
400 episodes of perfection. They said it couldn't be done. And we said, it definitely can, and we will.
Watch this space. Cookies.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.